We want to talk about why we're making this film. For me, it's important that we tell our stories.
My brother and I have talked about this project for many years and waiting for the time to be right, and it seemed like now was the time. Things were just kind of falling into place that, you know, we could go forth with this.
When Jacob Eastman brought Charles back to the United States, this was his first encounter with an American settlement, a town built and run by a breakaway group of fiercely independent Dakota people.
This land originally was homestead land. It was not a reservation. Each one got a tract of land of their own, and they built their homes and they farmed the land. They were no longer controlled by the federal government.
26 families, survivors of the forced exile from Minnesota, broke from the reservation and struck out on their own, choosing to work homesteads rather than live under the thumb of an Indian agent.
They wanted freedom to determine their own lives.
I am part of the 5th generation since Jacob Eastman reunited his family. The oldest son, John, was my great-great-grandfather, mentor to his little brother Charles. They also had a sister named Mary, who in 1911 made these tiny moccasins for my Kunchi, my grandmother Lillian. How old were you when you wore these?
Yeah.
How old were you when you wore these?
Well, I'm just baby.
Just a little baby? That's Charles.
Charles,
That's
I mean.
Charles, yeah.
Oh, that's Charles.
Mary Faribault
Yeah.
and Charles.
That would be his sister. She never spoke English.
She didn't speak English? She
She spoke Indian all the time.
Oh, she just spoke Indian.
And yet, we kids could understand her and she could understand us.
Oh, he usually looks for clothes on sale, even though he can't buy anything, and tools, and things like that.
This signal that I don't know.
Here we are.
Oh, hi! Good to see you. Good to see you. Where'd you guys come from?
Hey! Just came from school.
Yep.
Beginning with Indian Boyhood in 1902, Charles Eastman made a lasting mark on American literature.
This is beautiful.
It's the first edition.
No.
Mm-hmm.
That's his signature?
Mm-hmm.
You know, he saw himself, even though he had no citizenship, no American citizenship, he saw himself and said, I am an American. But he said, I am an Indian. I am a Dakota man.
When I first went back to school, one of the first things I read was from The Deep Voice of Civilization. And it meant a lot to me because for the first time I felt like somebody finally understood, you know, those feelings I had. And it was like my uncle was telling me my family history. It was like my uncle was telling me it's okay. It's okay to be Indian. It's okay to be an Indian scholar. You know, it's okay to be an Indian intellectual. You know, you can be who you are, and no matter what, you're gonna be Indian. You know, and his writing gave me permission to be myself.
Katie has a lot of similarities with Charles in her life. Charles went to the mission school here in Flandreau, and when he first went to the school, he was very frustrated because he didn't know English. He couldn't read the Dakota language, and he walked out and he left the school. and he didn't know if he'd ever return to school again. But he went and he spent time alone and thought about it and thought about what his father had said to him, that he should get an education, that he should go forward with his life, his new life. And he made the decision to go back, and he would do the best that he could do. And Katie, at a point in her life, a low point in her life, left school and went and did other things, and now she's going for a doctorate degree, much like Charles Eastman became a doctor.
Jacob and his other sons had radically changed their lives. To Charles, all seemed strange and different. Jacob insisted that Charles learn English, and here at the mission school is where his transformation began. Charles was a huge inspiration to me. The way he learned English was by going to school and sitting there and having them talk at him. You know, he only spoke Indian. I think language played a big part in both of our lives. For Charles, it was being a Dakota fluent speaker and learning English. Whereas for me, you know, generations down the line, it was the opposite. It was being born with English and then going back to school and learning Dakota and trying to get that back and trying to understand both sides of the story and trying to understand the importance of both languages to our family.
What we see is an increasing interest in Charles's writing, and not just his story about his past, but his philosophy, what he believed and why he believed it and why it might be relevant today.
More recently, Charles was posthumously given an award by the Boston School of Medicine, and this is the award, and I never thought, that I'd be able to hold it in my hands. His family felt that we should have it here in Planger. And it's very, very emotional for me to talk about it, because I did admire him very greatly.
This is the closest thing to having Charles home, because Charles isn't home right now. He's buried in Detroit, and having this award come home is to us signifies a homecoming for Charles. I think it's time to bring him home.
My grandmother and my great-grandmother are buried here. And John is buried here, my grandfather. I mean, all of our family are buried here.
But this is his home. So this is where his bones should be.
As an Eastman descendant, I will walk in the footsteps of Ohiyesa, from the site of the Wounded Knee Massacre to the ivy halls of Dartmouth University, talking with historians, writers, elders, and relatives, retracing Charles' life journey, even as I try to make sense of my own.
Sound like Perry Como now. Huh?
Yeah.